Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Anchor Watch. I'm your humble host, Bobby Jones, joined by the executive producer extraordinaire himself, Sam. Welcome. How are you doing this week, man?
Bobby, I'm doing okay. I'm doing better than the United States currently.
Yeah. So about that, let's get right into this because basically we're looking at a perfect storm of self-inflicted gunshot wounds. So we have the oil shock is upon us. We'll talk about that. Chaos still at the Pentagon. And to be completely transparent, leadership and diplomacy nowhere to be found. Nowhere to be found. So, Sam, if you and just let me just get into the Pentagon first, because that's where
Yes.
I am most comfortable talking. So, if you've been watching this show the last few weeks, ever since this thing started, I said that the big issue are the American bases that have been hit in the Middle Eastern area of responsibility, what we call Fifth Fleet for the Navy or CENTCOM for the entire military, right? And the clue that I saw where I knew these bases are really, really damaged, that is open source that anybody can look up, was that report that USA Today talked about with the lack of fresh food, this, that, and the other. And if you remember, I said it is because these bases have been hit and their logistical nodes. Well, NBC this weekend came out with a scathing report saying that the bases that have been hit in the Middle East are way more damaged and way more extensive than Pete Hegseth and the Pentagon had initially reported. Now, when you look at these things, when you look at these bases, what I liked about what NBC did was it gave you basically a little short synopsis of what was damaged and this, that, and the other. But as you go down them, someone like me who was in that area for years, every last one of these bases shows a strategic brilliance on the Iranians that the United States has yet to understand. So, for example, the first thing there, Bahrain, yes, it is the headquarters of the United States Fifth Fleet. That is the fleet that operates exclusively in the Middle East. The problem with this is it's not just the satellite communications, the radar protections. That last line, the last two words, large warehouses, that is your resupply. That is your resupply. And if you remember any of these press conferences that Hegseth gave, nowhere did he talk about this. Nowhere. Okay. As you continue down the list, Erbil, the various camps in Kuwait that are basically army bases, and then UAE. And not all of UAE is there because there are other places that the United States operates out of that country too. It shows a control, a logistical control and noose around American forces. The amount of money that we're talking about here is now billions, to the point where there have been whispers amongst Pentagon officials, do we even want to rebuild these bases eventually since they're so close to Iran and we can't protect them? Now, Sam, that is completely opposite of the demeanor and the bravado that Hegseth and Trump have given. They talked about the interceptors. We're running out. That's the other piece in this report. We are critically low on that. So this ceasefire where they try to make it seem as though it's benevolent and we're trying to get peace negotiators in, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. No, you're running out of rounds. You're running out of rounds. You can't resupply and you don't know what to do. That's what's happening here. This is not, I don't care about the rhetoric. All I care about is what I see, right? If we were dominant, ships could pull into the Persian Gulf right now. If we were dominant, we would not be worried about the damage of these bases because it never happened. If we were dominant, American forces will be at their bases right now working, and none of that's happening. Your thoughts, Sam?
So, I mean, it feels to me like, like a bad chess move, right? You moved your pawns or you moved some primary pieces out of place to, I don't know, to be overly aggressive, and you exposed your ass. Mm-hmm. Right. And I wonder from you, I want to talk about the Pentagon too in a second, because I know you've had a lot of thoughts on this, but I want to hear what is the long-term ramification of limiting our footprint in that area in the Middle East. What does it say about U.S. power, U.S. soft power, our ability to defend our allies, our ability to strike if needed? Is there a world in which limiting our footprint in the Middle East is actually a good thing, or where are we? Talk us through this.
If the United States and their allies, specifically the United Kingdom, when all of this started way back, World War I, going into World War II and post-World War II, had adopted a mentality of self-determination for those nations, this would all be completely different. But because the Brits with the Balfour Declaration started something and handed it off to the Americans after World War II, we are now wedded to the region. Now, the way I look at this, people, ladies and gentlemen, think of an inverted triangle, right? Something like that, where you have the economic ramifications, the political ramifications, and then at the bottom, holding it together, is military security ramifications. The military security piece of this triangle that balanced the other two, politically and economically, has been gutted. Now, the United States has not been tactically, militarily defeated, but the blind trust in the security, Sam, it has a huge effect on the politics of the area and the economics. What do I mean by that? UAE today, this week, has said they are out of OPEC. That is huge. OPEC was the number one economic arm that was put together with the West blessing on being able to control oil supply and oil prices. Now UAE is like, we're out, we're going rogue. Now Trump's saying that's a good thing for us because the UAE is an ally. Well, they were before they got the hell bombed out of them and you couldn't protect them. Right. So the assumption that the UAE is going to be like, we're cool with America, we're going to keep doing this, and the OPEC countries are on their own. Well, the OPEC nations, almost all of them, are also affiliated with the United States as allies, right? So the economic change and shift has already started. Now, let's go to the political side of this, right? You had basically the Arab community in that part of the world side with the United States against the Iranians because they thought it was the most sure way to secure themselves from what exactly is happening now. And now they have found out the hard way that it was a mirage. It was a paper tiger. It was a lie because they saw the big aircraft carriers. They saw all this and like, oh, this military might, not realizing that the Iranians, along with the Russians, have started to change the way warfare is being fought in the 21st century. And they weren't prepared for that. And so all these expensive interceptors, all of these things have changed the political dynamic to the point where we've already seen them negotiate directly with Iran to try to save and salvage their own self-interest and have said the hell with the United States. The question that just popped up on the screen, would the Gulf states even want the bases to be rebuilt? That's a damn good question. And if I'm a betting man, if they can strike deals that are livable with the Iranians, they're not going to have our bases rebuilt anyway. And so now, this is the piece of it going back to the economic side of this triangle. That military security, the bottom of the triangle, which brought the political bias of those nations, goes away. We got oil when we relied heavily on them in the 60s, 70s, into the 80s, before we became more self-sufficient, at deal prices compared to the rest of the world. And now, because the world is interconnected, that oil market is interconnected, that advantage is going to go away, right? The oil shock is hitting us because of everything else that I just laid out. So this is all because of a decision that was unilaterally made at Mar-a-Lago, and the people that knew better completely were ignored. That's where we are, Sam.
Bobby, none of this would have happened if we just had a ballroom. No, but for real, look, it sounds like what you're saying, and I may be getting this wrong, so absolutely correct me. but that our military force or might or the ability to secure populations and economies in the Middle East and that region was the tip of the spear of our diplomatic efforts, right? That we could ensure and guarantee security for ships, for business, for trade, for life, for all of these things. We could assist in eradication of terrorism. We could do all of these kinds of things. And that power allowed us to exert soft power in the region. And for that reason, we were ultimately or essentially or fundamentally welcomed there. However, in some cases, it was more like we had our thumb on them, right? And this feels like it could be for, if you're a Middle Eastern state or a Gulf state, this could be the minute where you're like, well, I don't need them. They can't guarantee my security anymore, as evidenced by the past 10 weeks of this fucking blunder. They aren't, they can't do the thing that they essentially wanted or guaranteed that they could do. The only reason they're here now is to fuck with us. So this is our chance to get out from under their thumb.
This is something that I think the West criminally underreports. If you actually are in that region, if you watch, like, say, Al Jazeera or something like that, you'll see this. The tension between Iran and the rest of its neighbors has been palpable for decades, right? Because when you start going into the culture and the religion of the region, the Iranians have basically thought that these other Gulf nation countries have sold out to the great Satan and have walked away from, whether you're Sunni or Shia, you've walked away from the basic tenets of Islam to pacify them, right? So, for example, I'll use UAE. Dubai is smack dab in the middle of all this. It's rich as hell. When you go there, it's as Western as it gets. It really is. It's awesome. But in Iran's eyes and Tehran's eyes, they're like, how dare you, right? And so there's always been this, okay, but we're going to do this because we believe in the best benefit of us to be financially stable and to flourish. Now you're saying, I can't defend you. And all of this is happening. Let's see. The military has since moved into civilian. Yep. Well, yeah. So to answer the question that Ashley's saying, the military has moved into hotels. It is something that has made civilians, from what I've been told by people who are there, it has made civilians very wary of Americans in the area. And it's not like we don't stand out. It's very hard for Americans to blend in the Middle East, to be honest with you, just from our fashion and the way we walk and all this other kind of stuff. That being said, I think the long-term problem is this. Let's say this all ends in the next month. Okay, what do you do with those bases? And if you are getting kicked out, right? How do you remove all of your stuff? How do you patch this up? What type of reparations? Because the United States strategically failed. Let me be very clear when I say something, what I'm about to say here. The United States is no longer a superpower. And I know this is very controversial, but you got to understand something. The definition of a superpower militarily is to be able to strike your military forces anywhere you want in the world. That's why the Soviet Union was, through their Warsaw Pact and all the affiliations they had globally, in the United States. That's why it was the only two. That's why China is making deals throughout Africa, throughout the rest of Asia, into South America, because they're trying to become a superpower. We were, until now, because what happened is the Iranians have shown us that we cannot strike anywhere and everywhere we want to without having to figure out a logistical nightmare, without having to figure out the resupply, because they have successfully denied us access to a place that we want to go. In this case, the Persian Gulf. So as I say this, I understand the seriousness of the statement, but from a purely military standpoint, we are no longer a superpower. We are strong, and that's a separate issue from diplomatic and governance and economic. But if this does not make planners at the Pentagon, strategists at the Pentagon rethink how the United States military operates, then we are even bigger fools than we are coming off as now.
So tell me if I'm on the right track here, because that's a really crazy statement. That we're no longer a superpower. Superpower must, and it's not something I've thought about a lot, to be fair.
The logistical aspect of our military force is what made us a superpower. What do I mean by that? Multiple countries have nukes. Multiple countries have stealth fighters.
Yep.
Multiple countries have actually a bigger navy than us. All of these things that I'm talking about, they have larger armies than us, right? All of those things make you a significant military power. But the difference is we have agreements with over 150 nations to put our equipment and our people there.
Yeah.
With the ability to go into an area that we want to. That was the whole point. That was why the Cold War was such a big deal. You had to pick a side. And now we are at a point where we have the places that I just showed you on that list, we cannot operate out of.
So this is, go ahead.
So no, I'm saying just that region of the world shows that we cannot operate out of there right now. If we wanted to steam the George H.W. Bush into right outside of Dubai, we can't do it. The most powerful warship in the world, we can't do it. So what am I supposed to take from that? The bravado means nothing. If you have freedom of navigation on the seas and your Navy is supposed to be most powerful on the planet, you should be able to pull into that damn to Jebel Ali right now. And you can't. You can't. And can you tell me, Sam, the last time a U.S. Navy ship could not pull into a port when it wanted to?
And so perception, I think, is everything in this case, because the only difference between us being a superpower 3 months ago and us not being a superpower now is perception. And the world has found out that we actually cannot do anything that we ever want to do.
Right. If that was the case, insurance companies would insure those tankers to go through the Strait of Hormuz right now, and we would not be dealing with the pending oil shock that's right at our doorstep, which we should pivot to that right now. Sam, roll that clip showing what's happening as we speak. Because
news this morning, gas prices jumping again overnight, now reaching the highest price since August 2022. The national average, $4.18 a gallon. That's up nearly 7 cents since Monday. It's a new high since the war with Iran began.
Here we are.
Here we are.
We have been talking about this the last few weeks, have we not? That it's coming. And despite President Trump's best efforts to manipulate the markets yet again this weekend, talking about we're sending people, blah, blah, we ain't sending anybody. Iran's not sending anybody. Pakistan is not welcoming anybody. And the oil supply that took about 7 to 8 weeks to finally run itself through the oil systems of the world has finally hit a stopping point. It's here. It's here. So as we go through this week into next week, which, by the way, coincides with this ceasefire, the extensions and all this kind of stuff, you're going to see that price continue to go up. You're going to see prices for airline tickets go through the roof. You're going to see literally flights canceled because of a lack of jet fuel. Europe's already doing it. South Korea is already doing it. It's here, ladies and gentlemen. It's here. Going back to what I said about superpower, going back to what I said about being able to do what you want, going back to that inverted triangle that I just talked about, military, political, economic. The economic piece is here, ladies and gentlemen. It's here. And where's the president? Where are the daily Pentagon briefings on status of forces? Where is him? Where is Donald Trump talking about, okay, here's our economic plan to deal with this. We're going to release this reserve, blah, blah. There is no plan because they thought this was going to be 4 days.
Well, look, that wasn't even a plan. But here's the thing that I keep coming back to is that America has been for 50 years, 60 years, 70 years considered gold standard, right? It is the gold standard economy. It is the gold standard military. It is the gold standard diplomatic corps. If you're having a conflict with another nation, the United States has the diplomats, they have the integrity, and they have the reputation and the might to be able to come and negotiate with you, right? To manage all of this. none of that is true right now. And it's been eroded over the past 18 months of Trump's second, regime. But it's like a slip and slide right now over the past 8 weeks.
It is.
And look, I want to get to this point because, we were talking about the Pentagon earlier. John Phelan was the Navy secretary before. His only qualifications clearly were that he was a billionaire, and maybe I'm oversimplifying, but probably by not much.
No, you're pretty accurate.
So how do you conduct complex naval operations when your service leadership is in constant flux like this? I mean, what is the impression that we're giving off here?
Well, it's a couple of things. Number one, and I need to make sure I'm very clear. The Secretary of the Navy does not have operational input on what the Navy does. His job is to man, train, and equip, which is a big deal on its own because who we recruit, how they are trained, what they go to war on, making sure they're properly trained to deploy, that is on him. And that's culture, which is just as important as actually operating. However, it says something to me. It's another canary in the coal mine where you can see that Hegseth is like Trump. He's Trump-like loyalty, loyalty over competency. The acting Secretary of the Navy now, acting Secretary Cal, who, he was what we call a Mustang. He enlisted first, went to the Naval Academy, became commissioned, served 30 years, retired captain. Some of the statements that he has made in the past, I'm like, you cannot be serious and let that man be the person in charge of the Navy. And that's where we are, right? Fine, whatever. Hegseth has done this purge of leadership where we have proactively replaced competency with incompetency. He has basically said loyalty to me is all that matters. And what has suffered has been actual strategic, operational, and tactical excellence, because the assumption that someone was a different color or a different gender was the reason that they were in the seat. Well, you got a bunch of white boys running it now. How's that working for us? I'm just being blunt as hell about this.
Absolutely. Well, he's fired over 30 generals and admirals.
It's insanity to have an active war that we self-selected into while also gutting the people who could actually help you strategize to win it. That is what is happening. And so even if all of these people that he's replacing with are qualified to have the job, they are now being parachuted in into an environment where they have to figure it out on the fly, right? And all being led by a guy who's more concerned about what he looks like in the mirror and the photos that are posted of him than actual leadership. The fact that we have had to learn through leaks of the number of casualties Americans have suffered, and it's probably more than what we still know, the amount of damage done to bases, even though he's not telling us, he was briefing us pretty much daily at one point. And finally, the fact that he, as the damn Secretary of War, has not told us how we're going to win said war, says everything you need to know about him. This whole gotcha game was like, well, I'm not going to tell you our strategy because we don't want the enemy to. Colin Powell did. I can go right down the list of these guys that came in. Schwarzkopf, Powell, these people like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to surround this thing and cut off the head of the snake, and it's going to be fast. Period. And you're right. Racism is expensive. And it's not only costing us in money, it's now costing us in lives. And when you take what's happening with the Pentagon and you slide it over, Sam, to what's happening diplomatically, are we surprised that Iran's not coming to the table? Now the new excuse is that, well, seems like we're talking to two governments in Iran. Well, you killed everybody, number one. And number two, it don't matter because you're sending people who are not diplomats. Why should they send someone seriously?
Trump says he canceled plans in the planned Iran peace talks. He's said, look, we don't even know who their leader is in Iran. There's been New York Times reporting talking about the leadership structure in Iran. Mm-hmm. If the New York Times can get information that Trump cannot, what does that say about our current level of intelligence? Again, it feels like Trump is simply just throwing up his hands and saying, this is way too hard. This is too hard.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. I think what has happened. Well, a couple of things. I think Trump is in and out of mental acuity. That's number one.
Hmm. Sure.
And that has led the underlings to try to figure this out. And I think you have differing opinions. I mean, the New York Times has reported about the decision to even do this in the first place. There was a variety of opinions, right? And so, because you have disjointed opinion without stability at the very top as the decision maker, you have disjointed strategy. And the only thing that they think is reliable is military action. Well, I have laid out over weeks how, yes, we have a good military, but we have painted ourselves into a diplomatic corner with it, and the military cannot bail you out of it. The Iranians will be able to outlast any military action we take. Full stop. Full stop. And the intelligence assessments that keep leaking out about just how much they have left in their stock is sobering. And to show you the arrogance that we still have because we think this is, I don't know, 1956. Ukraine is like, we know how to defeat this threat, these drones, and we still have not taken them up on the offer. It is mind blowing to me. And now, as Americans start to pay $5, $6 a gallon for gas, and one of our loyal watchers mentioned, hey, it's much higher where she is. This is the average that we're talking about.
Yeah, right.
You know, America's going to ask some very hard questions. And then the final piece of this that I want to mention, Sam, Congress not knowing how damaged military bases overseas are. Congress not knowing
Right.
the actual tactics that are being used. Congress not knowing the actual casualty number of American citizens is the biggest abdication of responsibility throughout this entire thing. If Hegseth wants to run a fool, that's fine. If Trump wants to run a fool, that's fine, because Congress is supposed to impeach their asses. They have no idea what's going on. They're getting their information from the media and not directly from the Department of Defense. And President Trump has yet to really address that body on what the hell is going on. That's where we are, ladies and gentlemen, going into the third month of this war.
It feels not like it's spiraling out of control, but that it was out of control from the very beginning. And that these, it's almost like a shattered window.
Mhm.
It is so destroyed that, our diplomacy is destroyed. The region is destroyed. The sort of global order is destroyed in a way that the United States is not going to be able to have a hand in putting all of this back, because there are other actors, there are other players, there are other countries with their own best interests in mind that are going to come to the table, and nobody gives a shit about us anymore because we can't do any of the things we said we could. And look, I want to double down on this. When Trump says we don't know who the leader is in Iran, he thinks he's insulting the Iranians.
Yeah.
They know who the leaders are.
Yes, they do.
Right. They know Revolutionary Guard is taking leading the country into a more militarized stance, militarized leadership, away from the sort of like religiosity that has existed for the past 47 years. They know exactly who's in charge. And now when Trump says that, they're like, oh, well, this is great. He's not been able to read our cards. He doesn't know what we've got.
Right. And Trump saying that publicly. David asked a question earlier in the chat, and he said, you say we're no longer a superpower. Is that a permanent thing, or is it because of Trump? And my answer to that would be, I don't think it's a permanent thing, but I do think it's opened a window. Because here's the thing. Once Trump is done doing whatever damage he does, the United States has a very small window of reestablishing trust, at least starting to. I think it's going to take decades to reestablish trust. I think the ripple effect of Trump that we're seeing, countries like Japan trying to rearm themselves, countries that relied on American security and stability to protect them are now saying we have to do it on our own. The NATO countries looking at ways to do this, talking about not meeting annually anymore. All of this is happening because of one dude. So is it possible that, America can still be a superpower? Of course. Of course it is. However, I will say this. We have done nothing to inspire confidence because when the world looks at Trump, they look at us. We're the ones that put him in there again. And so the question you're asking yourself is, does the world trust the American citizen to make the right decisions about how it runs its democracy, and therefore how its military, how its economic policy, how its diplomatic policies relate to the rest of us? That's the question that needs to be answered. Is it possible? Sure. Is it likely? As polarized as we are now, I doubt it.
Well, look, I think, I think the question you have to ask yourself is, would you trust us? Right? You're running another country, and you have built your entire century around the economic power and military might of the United States, and it's gone. Donald Trump has done everything he can to erase economic gains, to throw the world economy in chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
he's demonstrating every single day that we're a paper tiger.
We have not seen political shifts globally like this because of American action since World War II.
Right.
Let me be very clear. When you look at all the countries, to include our allies, to include our adversaries, to include those who are supposedly neutral to us, we have not seen countries overwhelmingly take definitive stands like this since the end of World War II. And you need to ask yourself, America, you really need to ask yourself, because, this is all our doing. What now? What type of world order will your kids enjoy because of the last 3 months? It's that simple.
I think there's another thing that we got to say, and then I got to jump. But I got to pick up a kid.
Yeah, that's fine.
But the fact that we're not being attacked, or that Taiwan is still, relatively safe, is just the good nature of our adversaries. It is the goodwill of them to not hit us right now when we're down, because I think in this moment, another country, if they wanted to, they could deal maybe not a death blow, but they could throw us into absolute and abject chaos.
Well, I think what you're seeing is what's called strategic patience.
Yeah.
Again, China's culture, they look at things in hundreds of years, decades, not like tomorrow and next week. There's a strategic patience that they are showing that because of our leadership, we clearly lack. Let's remember, it took years to get that first Iranian nuclear deal done. Years of direct negotiation, right? China's looking at this and they're just like, interesting. This is happening. And mind you, their two biggest competitors, let's not even call them adversaries anymore. Let's try to be nice. Russia and the United States are proactively both in wars against nations that on paper, both Russia and the United States should dominate. And yet both of them are getting their asses handed to them.
Yep.
What does that tell you? That's why China is just sitting back like this and like, interesting. The two countries that were the superpowers of the 20th century, because they have latched on so tightly to that legacy, the imagery, and the projection of it, are failing to win wars in the 21st century. And China's just waiting and sitting and listening and watching.
If I was China, I would do the same thing. And here's why. They have to exert almost no energy, expend no resources, do nothing militarily that's going to corrupt their image or do all they have to do is sit there and watch everyone else shoot themselves.
It's been fascinating to watch them, and not many people are watching them. But when you start thinking about things like, I don't know, the tankers that were heading to China got to go through the blockade.
Yep.
Got to go through the strait.
Interesting, isn't it?
It's fascinating. It's fascinating. And here's the thing, when they were asked about it, when the Trump administration was asked about it, they evaded the question like they were running back in the NFL. It was unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
So just think about it. You have the two countries that dominated the 20th century being dragged strategically by countries that should not have the wherewithal to do it. You can sit there and talk about the tactical stuff, the explosions, the amount of targets that have been hit, the thousands of targets we hit. Great, heck, Seth. Ukraine's been taking hundreds and thousands of hits for freaking 4 years, and they're still there too. And they're trying to help your arrogant ass by saying this is what we need to do to stop this. And by the way, Russia's helping you get targeted, and you don't want to listen to them. So, hey, we get what we get. We have two men who literally do not want to admit that they need help, assistance, and this needs to be more collaborative. And we are paying the price for it, and you will start paying it at the pump today. And let's see how much money we're going to spend before somebody brings some sanity back to the situation.
Yeah, I think that's right. And we do need to wrap up, but I have a prediction. I think Iran comes out of this most improved.
Oh, God,
out of anyone.
I'll take it a step further. Iran is now one of the four most important countries on the planet.
It is, and I think they're going to.
Before.
I think they're going to use this for economic gain. I think they're going to be more integrated into the world economy. Henceforth, I think they're going to have a seat at the table, and Trump's going to take credit for it.
Yeah, well,
and fair enough. It is his fault.
Yeah, well, they have a seat at the table because we paid the cost for it to be built there, and I think the way the world fundamentally deals with the United States and the international community moving forward is forever changed.
I agree.
Full stop. Forever changed.
Well, Bobby, with that, it's good parting words. We will keep everyone updated on all the things this week. Bobby, it's just, man, so lucky to have you.
No.
And everyone out there, if you don't already, subscribe to Bobby's Substack. He gives an amazing morning brief. It's like 5 minutes sometimes. It's like all the stuff you need to know. It is honestly one of my first clicks in my email every morning, and I just appreciate it so much.
No problem, man. I'm just a guy watching the tea leaves and who's had a lot of tea before. So it's been interesting to watch this. But thank you guys for watching today, man. And hey, write me on Substack if you have any questions. I'll do my best to directly answer them. And thanks for watching.
Awesome. Thanks all.